Hi, I'm Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and I'm here today to talk about the latest episode of Dexter New Blood, episode 7, From the Skin of Her Teeth. At least I think that's what it's called, because I forgot to look it up before I started recording. So, quick recap, last episode had the huge revelation to Angela that, Dexter was actually Dexter, and I'm kind of glad that didn't derail this season entirely, that's not really what the season's about. It's about what's going on at Iron Lake. It's about Angela having found Iris, and that's really where this episode picks up, is, Angela still not trusting Dexter, because he did lie to her for, all that time, but needing his forensic expertise, and him being able to do his Dexter thing, which was really cool to see. I imagine he was probably a little bit rusty, kind of like he was in the kill room, but, he very quickly figured out, that Iris had been shot from the back, basically Kurt Caldwell's entire MO. So, that leads to him being arrested, but then eventually released because he comes up with some nonsense story about how it was his dad who did it, and it just sort of reminds you of why Dexter existed in the first place, that people like Kurt Caldwell, he's been doing this for years, he knows what he's doing, and he's rich and powerful enough that he can come up with just enough to not get convicted, just enough for the police to say, we've got nothing, and that's sort of why Dexter exists really from the beginning. That's why Harry taught him the code. This whole season, there's been this back and forth between Dexter and, Deb in his head about whether or not he was necessary, whether or not him being him was the right way, whether Harry should have just taken him to counseling or taught him how to be a serial killer, as you do. But time and time again, people like Kurt Caldwell do cheat the system. Speaking of which, I really liked the sort of bombshell that this episode drops, that Kurt has been ahead of Dexter this entire time. Kurt knows that Dexter's the one who killed Matthew. He found the little titanium screw that was in Matthew's leg. Kurt found it from when Dexter tried to burn the body. And it seems like he's really just been toying with him this entire time. Kurt's been building his own case. Kurt's been doing his own thing, trying to get Harrison over to him. Harrison's stuck in this, tug of war between two father figures. One who's new, one who abandoned them. Ironically, they're both killers, meaning this poor child has been through a lot, as this episode shows. And it's kind of chilling to see Kurt in that position. It reminds me a bit of the back and forth and the rivalry between Dexter and Isaac Serco. That one, there was like this really cool, almost mutual respect between them, and the Dexter-Kurt, dichotomy isn't quite the Dexter-Isaac one, but it might be. We'll see how, the next couple episodes play out. I think the whole reason why this season existed was to give Dexter a proper ending, but now they're talking about, well, if this does well, maybe we'll continue it. So, I don't know, as much as I'd love to see Dexter kind of go off into the sunset and be happy and have his son back, there may be more stories yet to tell. As far as things that I wasn't crazy about in this episode, Harrison broke that kid's arm, like literally in front of everyone. They saw the kid tap out. They saw Harrison break his arm. And there's just like no consequences for that. Like I know Audrey's kind of freaked out. She doesn't want to hang out with him anymore. She doesn't want to invite him to spend the night anymore. But you're telling me that the police or that other kid's family weren't like, oh, we're going to press charges, we're going to sue? Granted, it was only like the night before, but it felt like that was just completely brushed under the rug. Like, oh, well, we kind of have bigger things to address in this episode. We got to have Dexter go do his forensic thing, and then we gotta arrest Kurt Caldwell. Oh, Harrison, yeah. Let's have a quick scene of Audrey being kind of freaked out by him. But I don't. Do we really have time to further develop that? Like, the biggest consequence he gets is the kids from that school showing up to beat him up, and him doing his Sweeney Todd routine with his friggin' straight razor. Which, that scene, I loved the sort of... Harrison's a character that's had a lot of this kind of pent up over the years, and it makes sense, what he saw as a baby, with Rita getting killed, and it does make sense that it would have been that podcast that kind of brought it all back. That's very much how repressed trauma works. You kind of repress it, it's pushed down in the back of your mind, and then something happens. You see or hear something, and it triggers it, and it all comes flooding through. And I think that makes perfect sense. And really, Harrison is ultimately a tragic character. His father abandoned him. Hannah died. His mother was murdered. This poor kid can't catch a break. And Dexter... It's funny to see Dexter just, he's really good at, the secret killer thing. Like, when it was stalking Kurt and intervening before he had a chance to kill that podcaster, he was in his element. He was calm, he was cool, he was collected. When he's trying to be a dad, when he's trying to relate emotionally, it's just as hilariously awkward as it was with Rita, except that Rita was an adult. Rita was not this, hormonal teenager dealing with all this trauma, trying to make sense of the world. So his failures at that kind of cost Harrison more than it would a spouse or an adult. But I do want to talk about our very quick cameo by John Lithgow, who still remains one of my favorite Dexter villains of all time. Trinity was just amazing. He was the creepiest. Lithgow is one of my favorite actors, and it was really cool to see him back in a way that didn't feel contrived. As much as I loved seeing Angel a couple episodes ago, it did feel like... It didn't feel like... Okay, so it felt natural that he was at that convention for police. That, I'm like, okay, cool. But then when he's talking to Angela and he's like, oh yeah, Deb Morgan and her brother Dexter, and what was his son's name? Let me think of his son's name. Why is that stuff you would bring up in casual conversation? It felt very contrived. John Lithgow's cameo, though, sort of seeing a glimpse of what happened to Rita from Harrison's point of view, that made sense. I felt like that was a really strong cameo. It was just enough that we needed to kind of get the point across, and it was a chilling reminder of the cost of what Dexter does. That when he's doing his job right, he's brilliant. When he's catching people who cheat the system, that's brilliant. When he's being selfish and keeping suspects from the police just so he can get them on his kill table, that's when bad things happen. That's when Rita dies. That's when Deb finds out he's the Bay Harbor Butcher. So, as far as next week, it looks like from the trailer, from a little preview, that Kurt is going to attempt to exact his own sense of justice on Dexter. He doesn't know who he's dealing with. So what did you think of this week's episode? How do you feel this season is going? Let me know in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. If you don't, you might end up on Dexter's table. And as always, my name is Dave. Every day is Halloween.